17 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Pursuant to the order of reference of Saturday, April 11th, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings are being made available via the House of Commons website. I would like to remind the members and the witnesses, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, please unmute your microphone and then return to mute when you are finished speaking. When speaking, please speak clearly and slowly so that the translator can do their work. As is my normal practice, I will hold up a yellow card for when you have 30 seconds left in your intervention, and I will hold up a red card for when your time for questions has expired. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. De Cyber-Québec, François Perron, Directeur.
From Cyber-Québec, François Perron, Director.
From Google Canada, Colin McKay, Head, Government Affairs and Public Policy. From IBM Canada, Eric Johnson, Partner, British Columbia Public Sector, Global Business Services. From Mimic, Faye Arjomandi, Founder, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Michel Berger, Chief Technology Officer. Each witness will present for 7 minutes, followed by a round of questions. And with that, I will start with Cyber-Québec. Monsieur Perron, vous avez 7 minutes.
Mr. Perron, you have 7 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for this welcome and this invitation and this meeting. My name is François Perron, Director of Cyber-Québec. It's at our College Center for Tech Transfer at the Cégep in the Outaouais. So I'm head of a team of researchers in cybersecurity, one of 59 centers of the Synchronex network, 1,400 researchers. I also an entrepreneur and a teacher and a researcher. I work in projects of transport technology and renewable energy technology. I have 3 parts, let's say, to my presentation. I'll give you a bit of context, and then I have some conclusions or observations, I should say, and I'll end on some solutions. So first, for context. Right now, we have heightened demand. We're in a period where we have to be confined, sometimes mandatory, and this pandemic is pushing Canadians onto the web. We know that internet should be available to all, and I would hope that we're going to take special consideration of those who are the most vulnerable, not only the elderly, but it could be another purpose. It could be isolation or the inability to use the technology. It's clear that distancing and isolation, voluntary or other, implies a greater need in all spheres of our life are affected. The transition of digital services has been catapulted to the top of the list. It's a priority. In order for all of this to work, we have to be aware of security, for example, and our presence on the internet. There's a few underlying principles. First, we have to establish trust online. And confidence or trust can be based on the ability to validate who we're talking to online. Be in a situation to leave a trace, unalterable traces, a track, a trail. So that's the current context. And I have 3 observations when I look at the current situation. First of all, with identity theft, I don't think we have to talk about it too much. We know that there's been a lot of it going on recently. It's clear that the use of a sole identifier, for example, social insurance number by the state, is completely outdated. It's inadequate. And if it gets stolen, we can't really replace it. So in order to be able to transact properly over the internet, we need a digital identity process. And it should be disaggregated into a number of sections, if you will. There are three basic parts. If an individual wants to give information, there should be ways to verify who we're talking to. The citizen himself, the individual who has to collect these various proof of identity, is a choice, of course, but he should be in control, he or she. And thirdly, there has to be an interoperable system, a system that functions well and in the same fashion for everyone. If someone has a claim to an identity, we have to be able to provide an answer. Question answer, minimal, but minimal is important because
Yes, MP Massey?
I might be the only one, but I'm getting both the translations at once. Mine's on English as normal, so.
Okay, thank you. One moment. We'll just double check that. One moment.
Same for me.
Is it the same for you, Madame Arjamandi?
Correct.
Thank you. One moment. We'll check that. And rest assured, Monsieur Perron, j'ai arrêté l'horloge.
Aucun problème. Je viens de choisir français.
I've stopped the clock for you, Mr. Perron. Okay, I think that was the problem. Maybe I was the problem, so I'm sorry. I've just changed channels there. So tell me if it's okay to go ahead. Yes, you might have just identified that. So if you'd like to perhaps pick it up where you left off. Right. The third part, it'd be nice to have an answer with a minimum of information, and that it would be the individual who makes a decision on that. So we're changing the paradigm somewhat, going to a multifaceted, multi-level. Oh, you can have an element of your identity might be your SIN number, social insurance number, but you want to exchange information with a number of individuals, perhaps, but you would choose what you want to choose with each individual, depending on your role or function in that relationship, that transaction. My second impression then, in conclusion, if we want a multi-layered system, we could depend on biometric factors as well, but biometric elements that you don't have to share with everyone. You can generate a different set of identifiers, if you will, to modify it from time to time so that you wouldn't have your entire identity stolen or hijacked. You have to protect, and to me, protecting and ensuring the privacy and confidentiality of one's identity and one's information, it's up to the individual because it's a matter of sovereignty, of autonomy, and we have to work on that. Businesses have to step up and follow through. We have to establish some rules, how to share that information, who actually manages or administers it. There's in Europe, for example, they've developed a general regulation on data protection. And if we don't establish something similar, well, we're going to be invaded by a bunch of people who see our system as being a little bit weaker and attackable. So perhaps in closing, I would offer a personal opinion as to what we could do here to ensure. Well, I'll use an analogy or a metaphor here of a skating rink. The state, established authority, is the proprietor of this particular skating rink, and he's responsible for the conditions of the ice. He's responsible for the height of the boards, who can play, when, etc. We need a system that is metaphorically the same as that. Okay, my time's up. Thank you. I see the yellow card. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Witness is Mr. McKay from Google Canada. You have 7 minutes. And just a reminder, when you see the yellow card, you still have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be with you in such unusual circumstances. And it looks like you've started to adjust, but this is my first experience like this, so please forgive any interruptions. I want to thank you for the time to speak about Google's efforts to help our users and communities during this time of crisis. Since the first appearance of COVID-19, we've been through an exceptional transition at Google. Teams across the company have launched 200 new products, features, and initiatives in response to the crisis and the needs of our users and our communities. We have made $1 billion in grants and additional resources available to users, communities, and countries to help them through this crisis and through the transition. Our major efforts are focused around keeping people informed with trusted information, supporting them as they adapt to a changing world, and making our contribution to recovery efforts across the globe. Early on, we took steps to make sure when users searched for information related to COVID-19, they would immediately see guidance from the authoritative sources like the Public Health Agency of Canada and info about symptoms, prevention, and treatments. On YouTube, we began showing users information panels about COVID-19 when searching for information about the outbreak. This is on desktop, on mobile, on the YouTube homepage. Under any video related to COVID-19, basically you get bombarded by these information panels when you're using the YouTube service. We've delivered more than 20 billion impressions of these panels to date. In a short time, we have all had to change how we live our lives. Google quickly recognized we could provide resources to help small businesses, parents, and teachers adapt. We've collected these at google.ca/COVID-19. And really, I think every one of us here today is trying to adapt in some way, and that's a useful resource. Educators and parents face the challenge of teaching remotely at an unprecedented scale. Over 90% of the world's student population has faced some sort of school closure. To help teachers, we created Teach from Home, a central hub of information, tips, training, and tools. 100 million students and educators are now using our Google Classroom product. This is double the number from the beginning of March. For parents, we launched Learn at Home and an enhanced YouTube Learning Hub to complement their family learning with additional content and activities. For employers and employees, we've consolidated tools and resources under our Grow with Google banner, trying to help them stay connected and productive, including smoothing the transition to remote work. As the world tries to maintain their relationships in a period of isolation, we've made Meet, our video conferencing product, free for everyone. We are seeing roughly 3 million new Meet users a day, with employees now working from home, students in virtual classrooms, and people looking to connect with friends and family. We know that people everywhere are looking for a sense of culture and community. On YouTube, we launched the Stay at Home's #WithMe campaign, working with over 700 creators around the world to urge their combined 2 billion subscribers to stay home and connect virtually with videos like Bake with Me, Work Out with Me, and Jam with Me. We're also supporting cultural moments here in Canada, such as the National Canadian Film Day, featuring Canadian films on YouTube. Our Pray With Me initiative, enabling religious organizations like the Archdiocese of Toronto to live stream their services, and a virtual exhibit in partnership with the McMichael Gallery to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the formation of the Group of Seven. In this committee's previous meetings, you've commented on our launch of a new product, Community Mobility Reports. We developed this report to provide insights into population movements that are relevant to public health needs, similar to the way that we show popular restaurant times and traffic patterns in Google Maps. These help authorities see, in aggregate, how social distancing requirements are working in regions across Canada. They adhere to stringent privacy protections. The data does not reveal individual movement or visits to specific establishments and is based on aggregated, anonymized, opt-in location history data. While the information in this report is not meant to provide a complete picture of the spread of COVID-19, it does provide information that can help public health officials respond to the crisis. I also note that this committee has discussed contact tracing. Since COVID-19 can be transmitted through close proximity to affected individuals, public health organizations have identified contact tracing as a valuable tool to help contain its spread. To help in this effort, Apple and Google are in the process of launching an exposure notification solution that includes application programming interfaces and operating system level technology to help these public health authorities in enabling a contact tracing program. This joint effort will enable the use of low-power Bluetooth technology on mobile devices, both Android and iOS, to help these authorities reduce the spread. Just yesterday, we announced the release of this exposure notification API. We're providing a tool that enables public health authorities to build their own apps in a way that is both privacy preserving and works reliably across both operating systems. Here in Canada, all of us are only just beginning to explore how we are going to reopen our communities and reestablish ways of working and living within those communities. At Google, we know that small businesses are the backbone of our economy. We've committed funds and resources to helping these businesses, who are our customers, our partners, and our users, to weather the storm created by COVID-19. As we are all isolated and fundamentally changed our buying habits, businesses were forced to react and adapt. At Google, we made changes to our Google Maps and Google My Business products to help them communicate more clearly to their customers and to their neighbors. We are collaborating with small business networks to work together to create and provide tools to speed this transition for SMBs. We've partnered with Digital Main Street and the City of Toronto's Shop Here program so that independent businesses can build a free digital presence and enable them to overcome challenges as businesses who are keeping the wheels of society turning, researchers and public health experts, or creators who are keeping people connected and entertained. We know that this work is far from over, and we're committed to continuing to provide helpful products and useful support as we navigate this crisis together. I have to underline that since the beginning of this outbreak, we've turned our attention and our teams to creating the tools and services and revising our existing tools and services to support the breadth of our community. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Our next witness is Mr. Johnson from IBM Canada. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Hello, bonjour, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about IBM and the Canadian response to the COVID-19 pandemic. My name's Eric Johnson, and I'm speaking to you today from Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm a partner with IBM Canada, supporting public sector clients for over 30 years. For the last 10 of those years, I've focused primarily in public health and disease surveillance. I'm also part of the IBM Global COVID-19 Task Force. IBM is a global leader in business transformation, serving clients in more than 170 countries around the world. Here in Canada, we're headquartered in Markham, Ontario, and our 100+ year history in Canada and our unique approach to collaboration provides small and large businesses, startups, and developers with business strategies and computing tools they need to innovate and keep the Canadian economy competitive. We're guided by principles of trust and transparency in technology to create a more inclusive society. During the pandemic, our priority has been and will continue to be protecting the health and safety of IBM employees and our clients. At present, we have about 90% of our global workforce working from home without any interruption in our ability to support clients worldwide. Now we're thinking and planning carefully for a phased return to the workplace, taking into account local health and government directives and conditions, employee roles, the availability of testing and tracing, employee sentiment, and more. We've developed a data-driven, evidence-based set of global return to workplace guidance, which lays out a set of principles being used to serve IBM and our clients. Since the start of the pandemic, we've been working closely with governments around the world to find all available options to put our technology and expertise to work to help organizations be resilient and adapt to the consequences of the pandemic, and to accelerate the process of discovery and enable the scientific and medical community to develop treatments and ultimately a cure. In addition to many efforts IBM and IBMers are leading across the country to support our communities today, I want to stress 3 key areas in which we're exploring the use of our technology and our expertise to drive meaningful progress in this global fight. First, putting technology in the hands of the first responders. Also, annually, IBM puts out a call to developers around the world to build solutions that address some of our most pressing issues of our time. And this year, we encourage developers around the world to put forth solutions that would fight against COVID-19 and climate change. This is perhaps the largest software developer effort in history, and we have dozens of IBM technical experts donating open source code and access to Watson on IBM Cloud. Secondly, solutions focused on business resiliency and trusted data. Our cloud-based resiliency and business continuity solutions have supported businesses to implement digital capabilities by providing mobility tools and infrastructure that resulted in seamless transitions of our clients' workforce towards working from home. IBM and the Weather Company created a new and precise incident map, driving unprecedented hyper-local understanding of the outbreak with health data from trusted sources, and it's updated every 15 minutes on the IBM Cloud. IBM Watson Assistant for Citizens was created for local and regional governments and health agencies, and it brings together years of investments in AI and speech recognition to create chatbots that can help guide citizens in a dynamic situation and free up important resources. This tool is currently being used by a number of organizations around the world, including the city of Markham in Ontario. The IBM solution for disease surveillance is implemented in 7 Canadian provinces and 1 territory, and provides a unified data model managing immunization data, vaccine inventory data, and for some provinces, outbreak management. We're currently focused on the provincial health requirements with the goal to help integrate the multiple data sources coming from contact tracing and lab results into the existing provincial public health databases so that the data may be used by our clients as a single source of truth for analysis, for reporting, and predictive modeling. In addition, we are already helping provinces prepare for the upcoming mass immunization events that we will need to take place once a vaccine is developed. And finally, we're leading the way to a cure with supercomputers. So in collaboration with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the US Department of Energy, IBM helped launch the COVID-19 High Performance Computing Consortium. So these high performance computing systems allow researchers to run very large numbers of calculations in epidemiology, bioinformatics, and molecular modeling. These experiments would take years to complete if worked by traditional computing platforms. And since the consortium was announced on March 22nd, we've received 55 research proposals from the US, Germany, India, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, Spain, and Croatia. So these are just a few of the initiatives we've launched. IBM is also supporting Canada's faculty, students, and families across academia by offering tools and resources to meet this new reality in real time. IBM has extended its online education resources to all for free, including IBM Skills, Open PTech, and IBM AI Education Series for teachers. Now the focus is towards rebuilding and relaunching. There's an emphasis on cybersecurity, expanded emergency operations management, social programs, and technology that will support the focus on mental well-being of Canadians. No question that this pandemic is a powerful force of disruption and an unprecedented tragedy, but it's also a critical turning point. It's an opportunity to see what we're all capable of and how we emerge stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Our next presenter is Madame Arjomandi. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Faye Arjomandi, and I also have Michel Berger, our CTO, on the call. I'm the co-founder, president, and CEO of Mimic, a software company based in Vancouver, British Columbia. For the past 10 years, Mimic has been pioneering the development of hybrid edge cloud compute and technology that adds cloud capability to device and apps to increase data privacy, reduce infrastructure costs, radically improve real-time interactions. It's eco-friendly and provide access to rural communities. Mimic technology is already empowering some innovative companies in health tech, fintech, AI, smart cars, and smart cities. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you as a fellow citizen, entrepreneur, and technologist. Our platform is already being evaluated by large enterprises as part of going back to workplace solution and gaining traction from some of the indigenous community. But we believe with your support, it can be used across Canada and globally for contact tracing. COVID-19 has caused the loss of many Canadian lives, is impacting our economy and the livelihood of our citizens. It has attacked our way of life. Contact tracing is essential to implement intelligent social distancing to send our citizens to go back to work safely and revive our economy. However, it evokes fear of surveillance, privacy abuse, stigmatization, and rightfully so, because solutions implemented by other countries are exactly that. One could say that such solution will be another attack on our way of life. Mimic's platform can be used to implement effective contact tracing without compromising citizens' privacy or patients' anonymity, and at the same time avoid many pitfalls along the way. There are three important aspects to an effective contact tracing implementation. First,
Madame Arjamandi, can I ask you
yes.
just to move the microphone back just a little bit? It's a little too close for the interpretation.
Okay, is this better?
Thank you.
No problem. First is about ensuring adoption. Adoption is poor if citizens have concerns that their personal data, however limited, is being held centrally by any external entity, or that third parties can track their location and access their contact history. Countries like South Korea and Singapore have reported to restored to force to ensure compliance. This is unthinkable in Canada. With our platform, each edge or client device, such as a smartphone, acts as its own server system, capable of receiving, storing, and sending information. The system detects exposure by combining several technology, including network address and Bluetooth proximity. This exposure log is recorded, calculated, and processed locally on each device, eliminating the need to send this information to central system. All devices remain anonymous and the only source of data, putting citizens in complete control of their data. Second is about anonymity in action. Some of the better attempts with contact tracing app preserve anonymity until a positive case is identified. However, as soon as a user is tested positive, the entire contact log from the user can be accessed by central authority. The core issue here is not about the data of the user that tested positive, but the violation of the privacy of everyone else who was in contact with the user. By contrast, our platform can verify and validate positive test ID and then use a token to send out alerts to exposure log anonymously directly from a user device. Third, and perhaps the most critical aspect, is that any contact tracing solution needs to be adaptable. This means avoiding point of failures. We see several major issues with current attempts at contact tracing. To just list a few. One, many apps requires users to register with Central Health Authority to get started. This is not only creates privacy issue, but also complexity, as users in proximity might not be registered to the same health authority. Two, some approaches require adding COVID-19 specific features into device operating system. This is unnecessary, plus it adds additional pain of dismantling. Citizens may be concerned that once functions get implemented in my phone and yours, it will not go away, which may inhibit adoption. Third, apps that save tracing logs on a central system need to connect with that system frequently to poll information. This creates a heavy load on network, causing all sorts of issues. I'll conclude by saying that hybrid edge cloud compute was developed for data exchange and transaction in private manner with ability for central oversight to curtail any abuse of our communication system by bad actors. The solution can work seamlessly across health authorities, technologies, and networks. And most importantly, by eliminating the need for sending or saving contact tracing history on central systems. We can protect citizens' privacy and avoid network loads and implement a truly scalable solution across Canada in health sector and others. As I have mentioned today, adoption, anonymity, adaptability are three important A's of contact tracing. Every citizen deserves a solution with this AAA rating. Thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into our round of questions. Our first round of questions of 6 minutes start with MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And so in Canada, we're facing a major dilemma. Right now, we have advocates pushing for put our frailest seniors in solitary confinement with inadequate care and no visitors. It's a mixed up society. We have blindly followed new disproven advice from our health ministry, and yet we're ready to convince ourselves that the government knowing our daily whereabouts is a good thing. My niece had to hear about her husband's death through a long-term care center's window. This in a community where you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that had a single COVID case. Whatever we've done so far is cruel and unusual punishment. And when I look at the many concerns, I think one of them has to do with jurisdiction. The last things Canadians want is a one-size-fits-all approach imposed on them by some big brother central government. And I know that healthcare is a provincial responsibility. The approach to treating high-density urban populations is completely different than rural populations. So if provinces have something that works for them, should we not be letting them proceed with that rather than relying on some faceless national entity telling them what to do? So that is my concern, is provinces to do what they want to do, but the biggest fear is that the federal government might want to take this over. I wonder, Google, you have had opportunities to deal with major players throughout the world. What would your comments be in this regard?
We're making the tools available so that any level of government can make decisions appropriate to their needs and their priorities. So the community mobility reports are designed to give that information at as granular level as we can at the moment. The same thing with the exposure notification API. That's designed for any public health authority that wants to build a contact tracing solution and wants to have the best possible use of that Bluetooth location technology on an Android phone and an iOS phone. I don't really have an opinion about the different executions at any level of government, just that we're conscious that we're trying to provide technological solutions to support public health authorities as they try to find the right path forward.
Thank you, Colin. Like many Canadians, I think the use of contact tracing technology could well lead us down a slippery slope. And I think that is what the folks from Mimic were talking about. In several places where these applications have been developed, there's nothing to indicate just how long the application will be around for, how long any information collected from it will be used, or who around the world will be able to use it. So to Mimic, I asked this question. I understand you've also developed an application that's supposed to address the privacy issue, and you've spoken of that, but Canada's Privacy Commissioner recently issued a joint statement with regards to contact tracing applications. To highlight the points of what they said the government should be clear about the basis and the terms applicable to exceptional measures. Canadians should be fully informed about the information to be collected, how it will be used, who will have access to it, where it will be stored, how it will be securely retained, and when it will be destroyed. So my question is the following: are you aware of any government anywhere in the world that has embraced the principles that the Canada's Privacy Commissioner has said? And I'm also concerned what happens if there's a breach of one of these applications. Who is it that would be responsible? Mimic?
Oh, is that question for us? All right. So we believe that the best approach is for me as the end user to have control over my data, and I choose who to share it with, how to share it with, and also whether you have the right, or the person who used that data have the right to copy that data or not. We believe that there should be a policy to actually provide a fine and other matters for anyone who breached that data right that consumers are demanding. And that's what we're enabling with hybrid edge cloud, where the information should stay safe on device, and with the key that user has can provide permission to access for any application to use it. Have I answered your question?
Trying to find my my mute button. So at the end of April, a privacy expert and fellow at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University told the media that his problem with contact tracing applications is that they, and I quote, have absolutely no value. Putting privacy aside, these applications don't accomplish what they're set out to do from their perspective. Why then should Canadians be putting their privacy at risk if this is unproven technology that may not accomplish as much as people are saying? Perhaps IBM, could you take a run at that? Eric?
Sure. So this is when he says contact tracing, I'm assuming it's proximity tracing that we're talking about, what Mimic was talking about. I think the position that we've taken is very much it's a consent model, much to what Faye said. You as the end user should have the decision on whether your data, you opt in or opt out. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Lambropoulos. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here with us to answer our questions. So my first question is actually going to go to Google Canada. So obviously protecting Canadians and the privacy of Canadians should be the priority. And in a statement that that you and alongside with Apple issued earlier this month, you did mention that that there are strict guidelines in order to protect the privacy of Canadians. Can you please go into detail about what has been put in place in order to protect the privacy of Canadians?
I think you'll hear a lot that I'm about to say that echoes what Madame Arjomandi just said, which is when we're talking specifically about the exposure notification API, there's on-device collection of information that is not shared without the consent of the user. They first have to take the step to download an app and then give permission for that information to be collected. But importantly, the information that's collected about their location is actually anonymized and randomized so that it's not associated with the individual or the device, but rather is a reference point for public health authorities if there happens to be a person that has been notified that they're COVID-19 positive. So throughout the process, we're taking specific steps to provide information about the proximity contact of individuals without actually sharing the personal information of those individuals or creating a long-term record about their either their travels or their location. And I'd also like to follow up by underlining that we've made an explicit commitment both with the exposure notification API as well as the community mobility reports to shut those programs down once public health authorities have signaled that this current crisis is under control. Now, it's up to the public health authorities, and I don't think we have a definite timeline on that, but we have made that commitment to alleviate any concerns about this being a long-standing complication on your device.
Thank you very much. And from what I understand, there are 2 phases, and phase 1 began in May, or like I guess yesterday possibly, and the application is now available for Canadians to download. But then it's the phase 2 seems to be in a few months from now, where it will be more broadly used. Can you explain the difference between the 2 phases and in which way this may compromise in some way the privacy of Canadians?
Really, it's a technological progression. The reality that exists right now is we need an application programming interface so that public health authorities can develop the apps that allow them to build that relationship with the user and request that they allow tracking through Bluetooth. What we are doing as a second phase is we're pushing out modifications and improvements to the operating systems on the device itself so that much of that work is being conducted through the operating system. It's a technological improvement rather than a expansion of the program or expansion of the capacities of it.
Thank you very much. Do we know if contact tracing has been used before to fight or to track diseases and to ensure low infection rates? And do we think that this is a good way forward that would actually help slow the progression of this disease? I guess Google or IBM, has this ever been used in the past?
Speaking from my point of view as a one-time history student, it has been used in the past. I can't give you any judgment on whether or not it was effective and how it contained the virus. I think what I'll state is that we certainly at Google are in an environment where we're recognizing that we need to modify our services and provide tools to public health authorities so that they can explore options. And that's where we currently are, is recognizing the opportunity and then trying to react to it in a constructive way while recognizing our obligations to the users.
Okay, thank you very much. And my final question is, I know that it depends on what the health authorities ask for, and we're trying to protect Canadians as much as possible, but what specific information will these apps allow us to gather?
If that's directed to me, I can't speak to the specific apps. What I can speak to is at Google, what we'll be exchanging is anonymous Bluetooth beacon information, so that it enables the apps to identify and then notify individuals who've been in proximity to each other. The apps themselves, that will be up to the public health authorities to decide what sort of information they're going to request from users. I will note, however, that we've made a specific requirement of using our exposure notification API, that app developers cannot request personal information and they can't associate it with the Bluetooth information, and they also cannot request specific location information from the device alongside the exposure notification API. What that means in practice is that there could be an app that only interacts with the API, and then a separate app that does a lot more on behalf of the public health authority. That would be separate from Google services.
Okay, and the Privacy Commissioner of Canada requested, along with its list of requests, for the app to be decommissioned once this crisis is over. Do we know of any plans to do so once the crisis is over?
As far as I know, there aren't any apps deployed with the exposure notification API. We're certainly in contact with public health authorities about this, but that's something for the app developer to discuss with the Privacy Commissioner in their jurisdiction.
Thank you very much. You're on mute, Madam Chair.
Excuse-moi. Prochaine.
We have next up Mr. Lemire. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is addressed, first of all, to Mr. François Perron. To what point can we feel in security and safe vis-a-vis our telephone, for example? Could we be eavesdropped on, or is this a myth, or what exactly? Yes, well, there's a lot of clear evidence that your cell phone maintains traces of either its location or some of the flow that has gone through that phone. And with AI, there's a lot more analysis done to what that person is doing or where they've been. Algorithms rather can track a number of things, and as you said, it's quite possible. This week, Radio-Canada had an article on a $9 million fine for misleading information as to their protection of privacy policies. In the article, Matthew Boswell, competition czar, the Competition Bureau, will in fact act against those companies that give misleading information to Canadians as to the use or misuse of their personal information. Are these constraints or sanctions sufficient to compel these companies to act appropriately? Well, I know the law a bit better in Quebec that is used in matters of the digital world for health information by public authorities. And it's very, very clear. For example, consent has to be obtained, but it has to be explicit and significant consent to divulge or share personal information. In health matters, the situation is quite constraining, but not necessarily in the private sector. Well, how can we ensure that individual citizens will be aware and responsible for their own protection of their own information? You talked of a digital ecosystem. Can the ecosystem lead to development of what is called clear, full, and informed consent in situations such as a pandemic, for example? Well, the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem is going to sort of self-develop autonomously, and it could go in either of two ways. The population will be attracted by that ecosystem and will start to participate in it, asking questions, getting answers, various scenarios of what we can do to protect ourselves. Or it might go in another direction. How well it'd be structured, how will it succeed to respond to standards that are in place, for example, or guidelines. It's a matter of educating the public and providing information. In the context of this pandemic, we know that a company called Mila is looking to the development of an app that is, in fact, operable with Bluetooth technology. How can we ensure that the information, once out there, and of course, the overriding thing involved here, of course, is the protection of the public well-being. If somebody is tested positive, is not identified to the system, how can we do that if consent needs to be given? Well, that's a very specific question on the idea of a second category of citizenship where we have extra information on these individuals, a subclass of citizenship. If the application is considered to be an application which contains private information, medical information, for example, and it's in the public domain, well, it's clear in Quebec. We can insist. Well, the individual who owns that information, it's his information, her information, can in fact refuse consent or wishes to the right to be forgotten. In other words, to withdraw, rescind the information. That's clear in Quebec. But with the public, there will have to be a matter of certification. There have to be some safeguards, in fact, to ensure that there is, in fact, a compliance with the authorities. We have to decide first if it's privileged information, confidential or personal, because right now it's not quite clear which is actually individually private information or public concern information. The Protection of Privacy Commissioner in Canada, along with his provincial counterparts, they made a statement, a joint statement, that the choices made by our governments today as to the attention of public health objectives, all the while protecting the privacy of individual Canadians, is fundamental to the future of our country. The decisions we're taking today, even minor changes, might become permanent. The answer is yes. Everything is moving very fast. We're doing video conferences right now. And where's the transit for this information? Are we sure this information is going to stay in Canada? There's a number of questions. progress is being made so quickly, changes are occurring so fast that there's a very, very high risk of leakage. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Next round of questions goes to MP Massey. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll have a question for every witness. It'll be a part A and part B. And I'll set it up and then go through the list so that they can answer appropriately. Back in March of 2018, I tabled Canada's first digital Bill of Rights. It was an attempt to start the process and discussion as a more formalized updating of our regulations, laws, and agencies, and an overall, I guess, feeling that Canadians will be confident that their digital rights should be respected similar to their physical rights, empowerment, and as well control, issues like net neutrality, a series of different things. But most importantly is to have, I guess, a predictable pattern that businesses, not-for-profits, governments, and then also either other institutions from around the world will understand that Canadians are protected in a very specific way, in a very tangible way, empowered by law. We've seen a number of different issues come up with this COVID response, everything now, even in terms of tracing being discussed. And then last night we had interesting testimony with regards to fraud that was very important. And this is part of the question that I looked at some of the issues. The Competition Bureau, for example, when we talked about online information, they just fined Facebook for $9 million. It's $5 billion in the United States for misleading Canadians and using third-party applicants and allowing private information to be dispersed. And the Competition Bureau over here is only at a $9 million fine versus $5 billion. The Privacy Commission has already suggested and said specifically they need more resources and money with regards to doing their job and the challenges they face. And you look at the CRTC, even before this, it takes ages to get an answer or a decision, also enforcement or public policy issues related to internet use, service rates, and expansion. So my questions to the guests, and I'll ask their names specifically. We'll start from the order of presentation. A, do you accept, support, or reject a digital Bill of Rights that could be brought forth in some capacity with everybody involved to finalize a position, to have at least an understandable sound grounding of what that means for each person and also responsibilities of companies? And then B, do government agencies and their respective legislations need modernization or updating? You don't have to get into the specifics of that, but I'd like to hear from those things. So first, maybe perhaps we can start with Cyber Quebec. A is accept, reject, or support a digital Bill of Rights, and then second of all, agreeing or not agreeing, or your position of whether government agencies need modernization or are they capable right now?
So it's quite difficult to give you a clear and complete answer. To my mind, it's very clear that the legislative or the legal and judicial framework is very unclear. We have difficulty even distinguishing between what is the private domain and the public domain. So we're going to have to put some teeth into that. It's very important here. When we compare what's going on in Europe with the general regulation on data protection, we, by comparison, are lacking in protecting, and there's no teeth. There's no teeth. The sanctions are not particularly effective. I missed a little bit of your question there, but I do believe we should improve the current situation. We need more teeth to the law.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Perron. Next is to Google, Mr. McKay.
Thank you for the question. If I think I remember your bill when you tabled it, there are many elements in it that are complementary to the conversation we've been having up until this crisis around reforming Canada's data protection laws. And I want to underline that there's certainly a conversation to be had around PETA, but also the Privacy Act, especially in the context of the conversation we're having today, to modernizing and recognizing, as many of our witnesses have reinforced, the need for explicit consent from users and then the defined circumstances for the use and then withdrawal of data that's being shared. So I think my answer to you is yes, and I think we've seen some of those paths begin. And my answer to your second question is there's, as we can see from the Competition Bureau's decision, there are specific roles and responsibilities and penalties that already exist within our system. And you hinted from your question that they may not work at the speed and the breadth that some of us may want. Google certainly is working globally around leveling the playing field on data protection as well as consumer protection. And we're a participant in those conversations. And it's certainly a space to grow in Canada.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson for IBM.
Yes, thanks. I would echo Colin's comments. We would support obviously modernization of it. It's all about trust and transparency, and that's what we've got to build. And we've seen it in Europe, as you mentioned, with GDPR, and so we're supportive of going down that path. Yeah.
Thank you. And Madam Arjamandi for Mimic.
Yes, absolutely, we support it. In fact, in 2017, we published a digital freedom manifesto about personal data. And a few months ago, we published consumer analytics or data robbery, because we believe that data belong to us. In fact, it should be treated as form of an income for us versus just generating income for others. And also we believe that we're facing not only data privacy, but data piracy. And consent is not enough. We need to be engaged with our data and given permission of use of data every step through.
Thank you very much, Madame Arjamandi. Sorry, that's all the time we have for that round. The next round of questions goes to MP Rempel-Garner. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions will go to Mr. McKay. I'm looking at YouTube's community guidelines related to COVID-19 medical misinformation policy. It says that YouTube doesn't allow content that spreads medical misinformation or that contradicts the World Health Organization's or local health authorities' advice. Does this mean that Google and YouTube are now taking responsibility as a platform for determining truth about public health information during a pandemic?
No, we're looking to public health authorities who have the experience and the expertise to provide guidance on what they consider authoritative information.
So if you're not looking to take responsibility, then why do it?
Sorry, why apply the guidelines and battle misinformation on YouTube? Because our
I guess I would contextualize the question. In January, the World Health Organization said that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus. Would YouTube have removed a video questioning that at that point in time under this policy?
I'm sorry, I can't speak to possibilities. I can only speak to the practical experience we've had.
Sure. So in that practical experience, would YouTube, this community guideline, would it have applied to videos or users that were talking about using masks to prevent the transmission of COVID-19 when the WHO was advising or quiet on that issue?
I think that the policy itself is applied to instances where there's an explicit threat to personal safety or health, and where there's the possibility of personal injury. So in the case you're describing, whether it's the use or non-use of masks, we would still turn to WHO and public health authorities to give us guidance on it.
I'm reading directly from the policy, and it says that the policy would remove content that, quote, contradicts WHO or local health authorities' guidance on treatment, prevention, diagnostic, and transmission. So I think it's a little broader than that. So would this policy have applied to content that was, let's say somebody posted a video saying that border control measures do work when the WHO was saying that they don't work?
We try to apply the policy as broadly and effectively as possible. And the reality is that we're facing circumstances day to day where we're dealing with misinformation on a much more significant scale. So what you're describing here would sound in our conversation as something that would need to be deliberated. But at the time,
just as legislators, I'm just wondering if this opens your company up to legal responsibility for determining what is truth in a pandemic situation. I'm just curious why you're taking this position as opposed to just acting as a platform.
we are acting as a platform, but we're looking to inform sources to give us the information so that we can ensure that authoritative information is going to our users. We also take.
So what about in a situation where the quote informed source is wrong, as the WHO has been?
I think one of the advantages of our platform is that there is ongoing debate and opposing points of view available in the content that is made available by our users.
But your platform community guidelines say that it would remove content that would have an opposing viewpoint to the WHO.
And I think in practice, when we're dealing with issues of particular notoriety and severity, we're acting quickly and we're following those guidelines.
Again, I'm just wondering if, because there seems to be some ambiguity here on the purpose of this policy, would you say it's less about misinformation, more about perhaps upholding existing political dogma on a certain topic?
No, I would say that it's wholly about providing authoritative and reliable information for the user.
And I'm just curious, if I post this clip to my YouTube channel, will it meet community guidelines?
Sorry, I don't see how it wouldn't. It's being broadcast right now and we're having a straightforward conversation with an obvious difference of opinion.
Thanks. I'll end my comments there.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Assassi. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to each one of the witnesses. I found today's testimonies incredibly helpful. And I say that because there's been a flurry of activity in different jurisdictions, and contract tracing is obviously of great interest. However, just to step back from the technical details, I wanted to ask each of you a very, very short question. For contract tracing to work, in each one of your estimations, what percentage of the population of a jurisdiction has to participate or has to be part of that uptake process? So if you could just provide me numbers. Mr. Perron?
I have not researched this question, so I will defer comment.
So no estimates?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Mr. McKay?
I'm afraid I don't have an estimate for you as well.
Nothing, no rough estimates either?
No, what I'll just say is that the reason Apple and Google are working together is a recognition that we do need collaboration across platforms so that there is the greatest possibility for public health authorities to make that option available to our users.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, roughly what percentage of the population of a jurisdiction have to participate to make it an effective tool?
So I would say I can tell you what I'm hearing from other countries, from experts there. I can't give a position myself, but the general percentages I'm hearing is between 60 and 80% to get an effective coverage. That's I think is what seems to be in the public. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Arjamandi?
Yes, I've heard the same data is about 60%, 60 to 70% population. And the only way, in my opinion, to get that going is to give trust to users that they have their own data and they are in control of it, and nothing goes to cloud to get anonymized post. Everything is basically managed on the edge device, calculated on the edge device, and it's in their control. And that's the whole architecture that we've been following to inhibit basically the data even going to cloud, but everything is getting processed and calculated on device, and it's cross-device, cross-operating system, cross-network and cloud.
So that having been said, and you were referring to triple A rating for privacy. And I understand that Google had the opportunity to elaborate on what their privacy safeguards were. We didn't have a chance to hear from you specifically on that issue. Could you elaborate what the privacy features are in your app?
Sure. So with Hybrid Edge Cloud platform, again, the data resides on the device itself. It gets calculated on device. We don't send location information to cloud. Basically, we measure proximity on device level, and we do proximity mapping using Hybrid Edge Cloud. So I know there were two devices close to each other, but I don't know who that device belonged to and where the location of that device has been. And that's the most important thing. And we provide visibility to the end user to decide which data at which point they want to share with which healthcare provider. And they have the control to say whether the healthcare can copy or can keep the data, or they want to, basically they have only access and view to that data. And these are basically the only way that I, as a citizen, would use an application like this, and I would recommend it to my parents and my sibling and my loved one. Otherwise, I, as a technologist, would be the first one to avoid using such technology. And also, there should be an actionable. I mean, once I have the contact tracing, there should be an action, and there should be an incentivization to share some data. Incentivization should not be with advertising, but should be, for instance, with healthcare service offering, that in case I get sick, something that I receive in terms of care and support, that now I be willing to share some information with the right person and right point of contact.
Thank you. Now to step out from the contract tracing issues, Mr. Johnson, you being part of the IBM Global Task Force, you have a bird's eye view as to what's taking place in various jurisdictions. Are we as a country doing a good job leveraging our digital infrastructure to be ready, not just for COVID, but for future pandemics?
Very quickly.
Okay, very quickly. Yes, Canada's doing a great job. What I would say is it's easy to be critical, and it's important to be critical because we can improve very much. We can do more on the cloud. We can do a lot of digitization. But I can tell you there's a lot of countries that are envious of the position we're in and how we've handled it. And you see it just from our public health leaders in the media. But
thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Gray. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions today are all for Mr. McKay. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Google Canada has been sharing community mobility reports, publicly displaying changes in location trends. For example, on your May 13th report, retail and recreation visits are down 38%, transit stations are down 58%, and parks are up 48% from tracking your users' movements. What apps does Google use to track people on these community mobility reports? Is it just Google Maps?
The community mobility reports are generated using data that's aggregated and anonymized from Google users who have opted into location history. So they've explicitly decided on their mobile device to share their location history with us. We've then taken that and we've anonymized it and aggregated, as I said, to identify these 5 separate geographies or types of behavior that give us insight and trends that are useful to public health authorities. What's useful to notice about location history is that you're able to go into your location history and turn it off temporarily. You're able to go in and delete it completely or delete areas that you visited. And you're also able to set an automatic setting that deletes it after a certain period of time.
Okay, thank you. So for if there's a variety of apps that can be used, for example, Google owns YouTube. So if people are keeping their YouTube open, for example, while they're out and about, is their mobility being tracked?
Sorry, those two are not connected. If you're using your phone with location history enabled, that is one function within your phone and YouTube is another.
Okay. Did Google Canada notify its users that their data would be used to produce these community mobility reports prior to the information becoming public?
We made the decision to both anonymize and aggregate. so that there in fact isn't any personal information or any identifiable information related to a user. So in this case, we didn't make any notifications because it is general trends and analysis over a very broad subset of users. When you look at the reports, there's actually some reports that have omissions or complete gaps, and that's because there wasn't enough information to do that anonymization accurately and properly.
So some have criticized Google for their lack of transparency when it comes to consent around location data collection. Wouldn't you agree that notifying users would have helped with this criticism?
We took an explicit step in using only the data collected by users that had opted into location history, because they had gone through a very specific consent flow on their device that explained both the information being collected as well as the controls they have over that information on their device. So we felt that that was the most appropriate constituency of our users from which to draw these insights.
Okay, so those reports aren't necessarily, so it's a slice, or it's a cross section of people. It's not necessarily a representation, a full representation. So some of the phones have settings allowing location to only be shared during time of using an app, such as with Google Maps. And in that scenario, would Google be including an individual's data in their community mobility reports when authorization may only be to track, say, for example, their location when Google Maps are being used?
In this case, it was when they were opted into location history, which is a continuing record of their movements that is shared only with Google within very specific conditions. And in fact, the setting you've noted is actually one of the ways that we've taken extra steps to give our users the information and the mechanism to signal that they in fact don't want their location tracked except when they're using an app. So that one-time use only when using app or only in this instance is a way for us to provide additional control to the user.
Okay, Mr. McKay, do you also share these community mobility reports with governments?
We share them in as much as we make them public to whoever would like to see them.
So with government, so there's the public reports. Would governments receive additional reports other than the ones that you're making public? Would they receive reports that would have more details than the public reports that you're posting?
No, they receive exactly the same reports that you could see on the website.
Okay. Some have questioned the data accuracy of the location sharing used, pointing out that if locations are tracked through cell phone signal instead of through GPS data, that the location could be inaccurate. Would you agree with that assessment?
There's certainly levels of granularity associated with what data you're using. And we explicitly went with these 5 regions so that it was a broad category that didn't provide for. Yep.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Erskine Smith. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. So if Conservative MP Ms. Rempel puts up this video, you won't take it down, Mr. McKay. If I go to the corner here at Woodbine and Queen and I make a video saying everyone should drink bleach to cure COVID-19, will you keep that video up?
That violates the guidelines and it should come down.
That seems sensible to me. So some level of science ought to play a role in your decision making, surely.
Yes, that's why we look to public health authorities for guidance, and that's also why we have explicit definitions for our guidelines so people can interpret them.
And in terms of transparency, if a video is taken down or downgraded in some fashion and it is a more debatable decision and isn't so obviously objectionable as drinking bleach, what is the appeal process?
I think you hinted at your question. There's various levels in which YouTube videos are affected by a violation of our community guidelines. In some cases, they're demonetized, so you can't make advertising revenue from them. In other cases, they're rendered private, so you can continue to share them, but they're not surfaced in search. And then finally, there's a takedown. And they receive notification by email that there's been a violation of the community guidelines with an opportunity to explain why that should be reversed.
Well, it's fair to say I've given you a hard time in the past. Would you say, Mr. McKay?
We've had engaged conversation.
So let me be the first to then credit YouTube and Google for emphasizing science and not sensationalism when it comes to saving lives. Mr. Johnson, you indicated you have seen research that a 60 to 80% adoption rate is critical for the efficacy of a proximity tracing application. I've seen the same research. Do you think we can plausibly get there with an app that is opt-in?
That is a really, really good question. I can give you my personal perspective. It's just to give you some stats out of the UK. 80% of people in the UK have a phone, right? And if you got to get to 80%, it's very, very, very difficult, right? So I'm optimistic because I think, the more contact tracing we can do, I think the openness that's been discussed and the consent, as long as people are comfortable that they're not being tracked and their data is safe, I think there's hope, but it's a tough road, is my view. Yeah.
If it is a matter of public health in relation to ensuring that we are free from deadly viruses, is it inappropriate to have more mandatory rules?
That's to me again. That's a philosophical question. I certainly IBM doesn't have a position, but I think we have to look to our health leaders. What I'm seeing, I can say in British Columbia, we all do what Dr. Bonnie Henry tells us to do. Like we're all in. So,
and maybe I'll put the same question to Mr. Perron in that case.
Sorry, I've arranged the microphone. J'ai dû arranger le microphone.
I had to readjust my microphone. So your question, what percentage of the population would use a particular app? No, I think I missed the question.
I guess I've got a minute left. So let me put it this way. In Ontario, I don't know what it's like in Quebec, but children are required to have a vaccine to attend school for a number of different diseases. It seems odd that we wouldn't take a similar approach to saving lives in relation to a pandemic for an application on our phones, so long as it is privacy preserving in every other possible way. So the DP3T standard, except for voluntariness, having a data governance framework that data would be deleted at the end of this pandemic. I wonder why, if a vaccine is not if a vaccine is not voluntary for kids attending school in Ontario, why we are talking about voluntariness to such a great degree with respect to an application that could potentially save lives.
Oui, en fait, vous posez une question.
Yes, well, that's a very interesting question. The problem I see with that is the obligation would probably contravene quite a few rules or regulations and laws. Consent, the notion of consent. To oblige people to share personal information, it's very difficult to do in a country such as Canada, with the laws in Quebec and also with the alignment of what's going on with public authorities. But I am not an expert in public health, so it's very difficult to see how that might work. So I have to say no.
So, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour.
Our next turn, Madame Gaudreau, 2.5 minutes. Well, first of all, a very, very sincere thank you for all this information. We've really moved ahead since last time we met. It seems that perhaps our information is being relatively well protected. How is it that 30 million out of 37 million have seen a loss or leakage of their data, their information? Do we have to backtrack very, very quickly to make sure that we are, in fact, protecting things? We, the legislators, to go above and beyond the pandemic, but just hurry up and change these outdated laws in order to help you, help us protect the public and its information. Mr. Perron, I'd like to hear what you have to say on that. Would you like me to add a few items? Yes, it's very important to clarify the situation as it now exists. I understand the public aspect, public policy, but it's hard to see how these public policies apply in the private sector. It's very difficult to claim a right, if you will, if the information truly belongs to us and if it's been exposed or shared, we should know about it. Well, no, but I have a question. I have a question to ask. Technology is well ahead of the law, so it's up to we legislators to adjust to this pace of change. So this is a cry from the heart that you're making for us here. We know what we have to do or what we should do. Take care of the laws and legislate in such a way that it would help us. And then we can see about, yes, you need a clear legal framework. It's absolutely essential. Until that's not done, it's going to be very, very difficult to talk about protecting rights to privacy or sharing of information. While you're answering some questions here, let's talk about identity. The committee that was examining the issue of privacy rights and protection of information was discussing the use of or to disassociate the SIN number, the social insurance number, so that it becomes an element of digital data. That's all. Just one element among many. Well, I'll carry on. If we use a sole identifier controlled by one authority or one agency, and once that has been revealed, it's as valueless as an identifier. So we have to change the nature of that identifier. Giving a new SIN number to somebody is not sufficient. Thank you. Thank you, Madame Boudreau. The next turn. Mr. Massé, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. To Mr. McKay, I know the bleach example may seem a little radical, but how do you kind of deal with, say, for example, President Trump says that you should take hydroxychloroquine, and the FDA has said you shouldn't, and what do you do with a circumstance like that? I mean, it's happening right now.
And it's a very difficult conversation to have, because obviously in working as a platform, we need to respect that there are authorities and there are elected leaders that are making specific points of view. What we try to do, and what you will see on YouTube, is that if a video is dealing specifically with COVID-19, there will be an information panel below that video that, in the case of Canada, points you directly to Health Canada's site on COVID-19, where you'll see specific advice about treatments and about social patterns and behaviors. So we are always in this push and pull where we need to recognize that there are leaders and they have a right to communicate with their citizens.
Okay, so yeah, and you'll be happy to know I did Google that while I was waiting for my turn here. I do want to follow up with something yesterday I thought was important from the Canadian Internet Registry Authority, and I do want your opinion on this. And what I found interesting about that testimony from them last night from Mr. Holland, which was good, but it showed that they consider themselves and they probably are, like the gold seal or a standard of registering internet sites using the .ca brand. I think I'm fairly naive in the sense that I thought the government of Canada, when I hear .ca, I think it really has some standards, but there's no follow-up to the authenticity of the activity of those that actually have that brand later on. I just wondered if you have any thoughts on that. And part of cleaning up fraud and attacking fraud and preventing fraud, to me, is some of the preventative work. I just find it odd that you could then use a platform like yours later on to perhaps be the sounding board or the morphing of maybe something very real and true at first into fraud later on. Is there any involvement in Google with regards to screening any of that?
I'm parsing what you just said. I think in terms of domain registry and geographic geographic location, that process involves CERT the first step, and then ICANN, the international registry, secondarily. I think for most websites, what you first turn to is actual criminal law enforcement, especially in the cases of fraud or physical harm or misrepresentation.
Yeah, and if I could just interrupt, they're overwhelmed right now. I know you're going to get cut off, and my point is they're overwhelmed, and we might need a more comprehensive solution. But thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Our next, we're now moving into the third round, and the next round of questions goes to MP Patzer. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to begin with IBM. In your opening remarks, you referenced a single source of truth. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on whose truth that is.
That's an excellent question. When you're pulling data together, you want to have one source. The problem is if you have multiple, for instance, you implement multiple contact tracing solutions and you're pulling data into multiple databases. When you're asked a question, you could get 3 answers, right? And so what's important is it's okay to have multiple solutions. You just want to make sure the data at a provincial level is coming in and is in a single source of truth. From that, you can then do systems of insight, you can build predictive modeling tools, but at least you've got that confidence that the data you have is in one single place.
Right, so if it's a single source of truth, though, would all 3 answers per se be available still, though?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's integrating it so that you know that you're only drawing from one source and you're not drawing from multiple that might contradict one another, or you might not get a full answer, that sort of thing. You want it all in one place.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to switch to Mr. McKay from Google here. We have heard here tonight that 60 to 80% is required for tracing apps to be effective. In the US, the adoption rate appears to be quite low. NBC recently reported that the highest usage is at around 2% in South Dakota. So why do you think it is so low? And how can you make the case to Canadians that these apps will be effective and useful as well as respectful of their privacy?
I think in response to your first question, I think we're only at the initial stages of the rollout of either the API or the apps. And to the second part of your question, I think it's up to the public health authorities and the governments to make that case to their citizens that there's a need and an obligation to use these applications for the greater public health. But we're simply providing the tool that enables them to make those apps more effective and more productive.
You had talked earlier about updates containing or being put through as far as having tracing built into it per se, or just more to make it more operate more friendly with apps. Just wondering, how easy would it be for, say, Android or iOS or like an Apple platform to force an update onto a device without the end user actually knowing that they were receiving that update?
I can only speak to the Android platform, but you receive notifications when there's updates either to an app or to the operating system itself that gives you a description of what is happening and why it's taken place. And then once again, even after the implementation of the updates, you can make the decisions within the permissions to deny access to Bluetooth, to deny access to location information. So even if there is the functionality, you can still turn it off on your device.
Reuters reports that 23 countries have expressed interest in your technology. Are any of these countries problematic in terms of their human rights record? And would you make this technology available to such a government?
I say that we provide this technology to public health authorities in the pursuit of public health. I can't speak to what countries those might be and what conditions it may be. We're still in the early days and we're still in the process of actually rolling out the API.
Right, but if YouTube is willing to shut down users because it contradicts a World Health Order, but if we have countries that have health authorities that are in gross violations of human rights, would you deny access to the platform?
I think we're still in a hypothetical when we're talking about the particular Apple-Google project.
Right, but I mean, for example, there are lots of countries that are predominant countries in the world that have their own health authorities, but they have gross human rights violations that have been either covered up through misinformation and different scenarios. Would you prevent them from utilizing this technology? You're.
I keep competing with the tech. once we roll out the API, there's a process of engagement between Google and the government and the public health authority for the implementation, and we need to make sure that they respect our terms and conditions and the terms of service around the API use before it's actually rolled out to their app.
Thank you. And lastly, would you allow information sharing between countries if they are using this same app? Like, you know, again, if you had multiple countries with bad human rights records, would you allow them to share records with one another?
The way we've structured the app is that it's on device storage and then it's uploading to public health authorities. It's meant to be binary that way, and any information sharing would be between the health authorities separate from our API or our OS improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Longfield. You have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to continue along the path that Mr. Patzer was on, as well as with Mr. Erskine Smith. I want to, explore first of all with Mr. Johnson from IBM, and then go over to Mr. McKay, which is great to see him again. I know he helped to guide us through Washington when the Indu Committee visited their last Parliament. A lot of what we do relies on cooperation and coordination with the United States. We are working on our digital strategy and including the digital charter, looking at increased penalties and enforcement powers. I know we have worked with the organizations like IBM on some of our strategy in terms of managing data, anonymizing and aggregating it, working with Statistics Canada. When we're working with the United States, we have some data treaties, and IBM is obviously on both sides of the border, in fact, across a lot of borders, which gives us some international exposure to opportunities for data sharing in the right ways. Could you maybe comment on the work that IBM is doing in terms of large data management and storage?
I can comment at a high level. I'm not an expert in this space, but I can tell you, like for instance, when we are implementing a system in Canada, in particular, that is going to deal with PI, public health information, or so we have to abide by the province's rules and the federal rules. It has to reside in Canada. It can't, cross the border or anything like that. So we adhere to that. We have a set of data-specific legal counsel that guide us, like with us, and we interact with the local, typically the provincial legal lawyers or federal, if that's the case. But that's generally and because of that, we can give a perspective from Europe or from whatever jurisdiction we need to talk to. But that's pretty high level. But that's what I've been involved in.
Well, that's good. And I know at the University of Guelph, IBM is a partner in looking at data around crop production and crop tracing of a disease within crops. This would be something similar, only on human health.
Yeah, and again, it's the type of data is very important in how it's shared, right? And so you may want support or people working on your data or working on your project, but they're not within Canada, then they have to abide by all the privacy and security legislation. We have to make sure they're not seeing that data, and there's all sorts of anonymization tools, and I'm sure our other colleagues could comment on that, but yeah, that's something we do as well.
And it's those things that the general public, I think, in terms of the rules around anonymization and aggregation to make sure public privacy is protected, people distrust government. People distrust big companies. You're one, we're another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So building public trust in order to get people to return back to work is a real challenge.
Yes.
So, and that's one that fits into Google and what is going on with Google and Apple. If I can go over to Mr. McKay and maybe to comment on the Privacy Commissioner of Canada saying, if this isn't effective, we will destroy the information that we've collected, that there will be management. But Google gives us, again, worldwide opportunity that if somebody's coming from another country, and let's say the United States, we have a lot of visitors from the States, not so much right now, but at some point we will have that again. How do we protect ourselves against Americans that are coming into our country and bringing the disease of COVID with them?
I think you're talking about general public health protections and border restrictions. From the point of view of the exposure notification API, you've noted an important element of how contact tracing must roll out and must be negotiated between public health authorities in different jurisdictions, which is how exactly do they share information, or do they correlate information so that they can provide exposure notifications outside their own jurisdiction? Right. And that is one of the more complicated elements of the conversation we're having around privacy, because there's an intersection between public sector data privacy rules and private sector data privacy rules that needs extreme focus and debate.
Which then also brings into the discussion the World Health Organization and the need for an international body. And I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next round of questions goes to MP Rempel-Garner. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to build on some of the questions that my colleague MP Patzer was asking. Going back to the sharing of information between an app or even the utilization of the API, I'll go back to Google. You talked about how there would be a binary between the app and, let's say, a public health authority. What about in a situation where the public health authority is part of what Western democracies would consider to be a malicious state actor with human rights violations? Like, is your company concerned about, like, essentially aiding and abetting or potentially aiding and abetting in potential human rights violations in that situation?
In the context of the exposure notification, in the context of the exposure notification API, we've explicitly engineered it so that all there is the exchange of information about Bluetooth localization, and it isn't identifiable information for the public health authority. So we would be communicating information about mobile phones that had been near to each other within the constraints identified by the public health authority. They would have to be, yeah.
Okay, so then going on to that, like, I know that Bluetooth technology in and of itself is certainly not impervious to security issues. So I know that there's 2 common vulnerabilities. There's blue snarfing, which is unauthorized access from a Bluetooth connection, or blue jacking, which is sending unsolicited messages to a nearby Bluetooth device. So what work have your organization done to prevent let's say a situation where a hacker falsifies the spread of COVID, or let's say a malicious actor does that, and then that information is spread. Like let's say I had my phone on and I'm all well and good, or my family's all well and good, but somebody wants me to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. I have no idea who would want me to do that. But let's say that somebody hacks my phone and sends a false positive on that. What liability would your company have, or how would you be preventing that from happening?
It sounds like you're describing 2 separate things. In terms of Bluetooth security, I could certainly follow up with what we've been doing to create a secure environment on Android phones. And in the other context, particularly the one you identified around false positives, that's actually a system that would be controlled of the Public Health Authority, where they would be taking the results of COVID-19 testing and then using the API to notify people who had been in proximity to the person who has been identified with having been in close proximity or having been diagnosed positive. So
sure, but what I guess, sorry, just to clarify, what I was saying is, what if I was falsely identified as being near that person?
Well, that verification would be up to the Public Health Authority, who is using that information to then request proximity data from the API in order to notify people that they've been close by. But the next step from that is then to move to testing. So in the way the API would work, you would be notified that you would be in close proximity to someone who had been identified as infected, and then you would move to testing to verify whether or not you in fact have been infected by the virus.
Right, and I mean, we're sort of having this context or conversation in the context of a Western democracy, but what about, I mean, things have changed here evenly to a certain extent, one could argue. But again, like I just don't understand that security aspect. Like, what if I was falsely identified through hacking or misinformation or something using this Bluetooth API? Like, I would be subject to a whole range of measures that I wouldn't need to be, right? Or somebody else. Has this been identified as an issue, or how would you address this? I guess what I'm saying is contact tracing through API could be spoofed, right? And so how would we address that as legislators?
I mean, we're speaking in a hypothetical. The data that we're talking
important hypotheticals.
Yep. But the data that is on an Android or iOS device is simply a list of exposures that you've had to other nearby devices over a defined period of time. If someone was going to spoof your test results or was going to try and trigger,
I'm not saying spoof my test results. I'm saying spoof me being near somebody who had a positive.
I'm just processing this because in the context of the data that's available on the phones, that would be extraordinarily difficult because the Bluetooth records themselves are randomized and anonymized.
I know, it's just, yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Jauhari. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to all the witnesses. Quite informative. We're going into a lot of depth in the technology and also privacy. One of the area that I continue to struggle with still is one of the elements that was highlighted as part of the AAA rating by Madam Arjawandi, and specifically the adoption. Let me tell you and put it into perspective of where am I struggling with. So Canada roughly has about 35 million. If we even try to adopt the lower end of the scale, which is about 60%, we need about 21.5 million people participating in this. Assuming we look at anyone above 15, this is probably about 100% of our adult population. In Ontario, we have about 14.5 million people, which puts about 9 million people should participate. Bring it even one level lower in York region, we have 1.2 million, which about 3/4 million people should be participating. In Richmond Hill, we have about 200 plus, which is 120,000 people should be participating. Now, almost 20% of our population live in the rural and remote area. That's roughly about 8 million. Therefore, using a 60%, 4.5 million people should participate in that. And forget about the digital divide and the challenges that we have on being able to actually get the platform going. So why should, and I know most of you opted out of answering this question, but I want to go back to where actually Mr. MP Erickson-Smith left. Why should we not consider on circumstances such as pandemic and opt-in model? Sorry, opt-out model. Make it mandatory by the government and health organization to adopt and use the application. Probably we could start with Ms. Arjawandi.
The opt-in or opt-out model, and thank you for the question, won't work because I can turn off my phone and not use it or use a different phone. And why do that when there's a solution? And the solution, again, if I create a trust between end users and government, that here is a solution that you have, it's in your control, it is available. There is no digital divide in the solution that we're proposing, and it's available on both Android and iOS. And the data, again, the data remains on your own device. I mean, let me give a very different analogy here. Imagine that all your assets, digital assets, are kept in your home, and nobody has the right to come into your home unless with a warrant because you're accused of a legal breach, right? If that's the way that I think about my data, then that's the way that I would try to utilize the app. I would use the application because it benefits me as well.
Yeah, so I anticipate that probably you answered that. I did a quick check. In 2019, when we had the federal election, 33.5 out of the 33.5 million people, 25 million were eligible. 66% participated knowing that their votes and their participation will stay confidential, about 17 million. So that's still way short of the 21.5 for us to, based on the number that's being discussed. I mean, we talk about the US 2% adoption, and Calgary, which is it's now into the 4% adoption rate. But if we, in our most sacred civil duty, we get 66% and 17 million, how we're going to ensure that we can get to 21.5 million?
Because it's my health and it's important for me, and also it's about suspicious to existing system. We all know that no data gets deleted on internet. I buy something from Amazon shopping and I come to YouTube and I see the video of what I was looking for. So we know that nothing is getting deleted. We know that every intimate moment of our lives are being captured and utilized for advertising. This is about health. We are worried, we are scared for ourselves and for our loved ones. We would use a solution if we know that my data is not...
Merci beaucoup. Donc, le prochain tour de questions.
Next round, Savard Tremblay, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. McKay from Google. In the last few years, Google had some partnerships either with health consortium or a hospital. There's ESA, where patients were not informed that there had been some data collection going on. A short answer, if you may, please, because I have a second question. Here you're talking about purely voluntary, so there's no problem with not getting consent. Is that correct or not?
You are getting consent because you have to download an app from the Public Health Authority in order to enable that functionality.
Parfait, je vous remercie.
Okay, I thank you for that. Leads me to my second question. As we know, when we download an application or install an application on a device, there is consent. Let's say that most people will just check off, I accept the terms of agreement or whatever. That's not your fault. It's an individual responsibility by the user. But there's never much explanation in this conditions that you have to accept, otherwise you can't get the app. What happens to the data that might be collected? So it's a blank consent on we don't know what exactly. So what do we do there?
In the case of Android, what you can see when you're downloading an app is there's actually very granular specifications of what data they're looking for, and you can click on each type of data and see an explanation of why they're looking for it. And furthermore, you can deny access to that data to the app. In some cases, that means the app won't work, but in most cases, you can be very specific of what data they have access to and when they have access to it. In relation to your question about privacy policies and terms of service, we've also taken steps to make sure that those are more clear-cut and understandable, especially on mobile devices.
Terminé. Merci.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next round of questions goes to MP Massé. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll leave this open to any witness that jump in. But just as with regards to the methodology of contract tracing and then that of public resources to, I guess, gear us towards it, we know by turning on and off the devices, that's one thing that will skew results right there. And then second of all, there is reliability of the data itself through the actual processing. So I don't know if there's any strong feelings out there, but I've always worried about regarding how much public policy we do through contact tracing for the general sense, because it is anonymous or supposed to be anonymous. And second of all, it's optional, and we don't have the other variables in there. So any thoughts on that? Put that open the floor if there's somebody like to jump in on that.
If I understood the question, is again, it's about adoption and how do we ensure adoption for the user, and I believe it's about ensuring that data remains private.
Well, it's also about the quality of the data that should then influence public policy. If I turn off all my data tracking, then that's not going to provide any balance in terms of it's a participation rate. It's similar to the census or something else where it's skewed because of if it's about location definition, we don't know what the skew is at any particular point in time.
I believe that's addressable by incentivizing user in terms of providing them the right service and giving them option to decide what type of a data they want to share with the health authority and with the central authorities, right? I believe that's the only way that if I have control over things, and again, this is not consent because consent is quite ambiguous, but being able to just kind of pick and choose, I want this data to be accessible by this entity for this period of time, and you have the right to copy it or you don't. You have the right to view it or you don't. I think that's the only.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. I know my time is.
And to have usage and to basically achieve in the best of both worlds.
I'm just very skeptical of the statistics of how meaningful they are.
Thank you very much. Now that completes our third round. We do have a bit of time left, so we can start some slots on the third round and the fourth round. With that, we'll give the first 5-minute round to MP Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my questions are going back to Mr. McKay again, please. So you have the mobility reports that you've been working on, and would you recommend that governments use these mobility reports for any kind of policy decisions?
What we've seen since the mobility reports have been rolled out is that public health authorities are using them as one data point in assessing whether or not their public health orders around social isolation and broad-based community behavior are in fact working. And that was our intent, was to provide that sort of trend-based analysis so that they would have an impression of whether or not society is changing as a result of their guidance.
So if the governments are utilizing this information when they're having their discussions, and if the public is also seeing this information, because we've seen some of these reports, the headlines actually be headlines in the news, you know, where people are moving to. I just want to draw to the attention on the bottom of the mobility report, you do have a statement or a disclaimer which does talk about you know, how people can have to be opted in as users, that the data represents a sample of users, that this may or may not represent the exact behavior of a wider population. So that's at the bottom of your 10-page report. And so my question is, with that type of a disclaimer, how much of a representation is it truly, and what amount of the population is it actually representing? Is it 0.01% of the population? Is it 90% of the population? Because these are headlines and the governments are actually talking about these numbers. So what does it actually represent?
I think We haven't disclosed the actual representation because you're right, it is a subset, which is opted-in users of a subset, which is Android phone users and Google account users. But what is useful from the information is the way that it provides a comparison with the baseline before COVID-19 hit, which is from early January to early February, which is relevant for most of the world. So it provides that comparator, which is a data point that's useful as people try to assess whether or not they're seeing behavior change.
Okay, and has Google Canada been approached by any governments regarding expanding the scope of the data to include more data being disclosed in these community mobility reports?
The government and public health authorities are interested, as everyone is, in seeing whether or not trends are changing or relevant in their own communities. So we are rolling that out gradually globally. So in the States, you can see data down to the county level, and that would be the next iteration of the report for Canada if we roll it out. But that isn't specifically a request from the government or public health authorities. Rather, it's the way that we're developing the report and providing the information as we can process it.
So actually, you've kind of gone into where my next question was going to be around breaking it down more closely. So right now, when we look at the reports, you have them by province or territory, and so do you have plans to break these down further, such as by municipality or by region, and to share that data with governments?
We've already done that in some jurisdictions, and the intent is to roll out that next level of data, whether it's at the municipal or county or regional level, and make that public just as we have the reports themselves right now.
So when you say you've already done that for some jurisdictions, is that included within Canada, or no? So you've done that in other parts of the world, and now you're going to be considering breaking it down further within jurisdictions and municipalities in Canada. What would be the smallest sort of subset that you're considering? How small of a sub would it be? Geographic? Would it be based on town? Would it be based on population? Would it be based on users? How small would you actually go down to where you're looking at bringing those reporting to?
The variable here is the hierarchy of data that we have available to us in our Google Maps product and how it's classified. And in fact, Canada is an interesting conversation because we divide those areas you just described differently depending on provinces, where some are regional municipalities, some are united counties, others are cities. And that's part of the process we're going through right now to identify how we can make that information available.
So if you go down much smaller, how accurate is it actually in that? How accurate is it? Because then you have a much smaller user base and people are much closer in proximity. How accurate would that information actually be then?
I'm getting a red card, but can I answer that?
Okay. Very quickly.
I'll just say that the existing reports reflect that data gap, where if you look at the territories, some of the classifications for the territories have major gaps in the trend lines because there actually isn't enough information available to us to anonymize and aggregate to a level that meets our expectations around privacy.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Assassi. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Erskine-Smith. So a quick question for Mr. McKay and Ms. Arjomandi. Mr. McKay, as you've noted, it's going to be challenging to get meaningful participation by enough people in a jurisdiction. Another thing I've been following is that in the UK, a lot of people had a hard time registering because if they had old Android phones, it was not compatible and they couldn't participate. So how do you intend to get around that particular challenge?
We're working hard to make sure that the vast majority of Android phones are able to take advantage of exposure notification and then the subsequent OS improvements. So it'll be a case where it's more than a significant majority through most of our operating systems.
Thank you. Now, if I could go to Ms. Arjomandi, I know that Mimic has a very strong record behind it. And I know that that your company has had its eyes on the ball and has been beavering away, if you will, for the last couple of months. What has your experience in Canada been, and how come you haven't launched an application to date?
Okay, for a solution to be adopted and distributed, we need government and our health authorities to build the experience with and the policies that we were just discussing here in terms of how to integrate, provide confidence to the users that their data is getting protected and it's in their control. I'm doing.
Madame Arjamandi, could you put the mic a little closer, please?
Sure. I'm doing contact tracing for me, and if I do that contact tracing for me and for my own well-being with assurance that I can share data where I need it to help me, then I will do it. Right. And that's why we have engagement with few large enterprises. But for the direct to consumer solution, we would like to have some engagement from governments. We have reached out to so many federal and provincial level government entities and health organizations. But so far, I guess everybody's busy. We're hoping to get heard for the direct to consumer solution. Thank you.
Over to Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Thanks, Ali. Mr. McKay, has anyone from the Government of Canada been in touch with Google to work together on a proximity tracing application?
We're in constant conversation both with the federal government and the provincial governments about the possible use of the Encounter Notifications API. And
is that the same is true of the provincial government here in Ontario?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And what happens in a few months when you roll out the secondary plan for the public health applications? Are they rendered moot in some fashion?
No, it's an improvement to the technology. So rather than relying on an API, the OS itself is improved so that the app can still continue in the same process.
And is it technical? We've had a conversation tonight about opt-in versus opt-out. Is it technologically possible, in your view, to have an opt-out system?
Technologically possible? You mean by forced download? Because if you're thinking about a forced download process.
Well, or updating the OS. Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Yeah, in our case, we in fact require that the user consent to the download of an application.
No, I know. I know. Of course, that's. I understand Apple Google's current system is very strongly in support of opt-in. I completely get it, but I'm just talking about technical feasibility. It would be if I automatically updated OS. It's technically possible to have an opt-out system.
At the moment, when there's an update sent to a phone, you have the ability as the phone user to not consent to the update.
Right.
So that exists for the app and for the OS.
Right. Mr. Johnson, every province, to my understanding, uses Panorama. Does every province maximize their use of Panorama in the same way?
No, and in fact, every province doesn't. There's 7 provinces and 1 territory that currently use it. And then the immunization and vaccine inventory is in all 7 plus the territory, which is about 86% of our population of Canada have their immunization data in the database. But from an outbreak management, that's only in a few of the provinces, 5 provinces.
Which province best uses Panorama?
Best, what I would say is the most extensive use, I would have said British Columbia. And they do it in a whole bunch of different ways. The health authorities all implement it quite a little bit different. But Saskatchewan, Manitoba have outbreak, as does Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick is in the process. They're almost there. But they're all using it extensively, yeah, those ones.
But not Ontario and Quebec.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this evening. I'd like to thank the witnesses. Merci beaucoup pour votre temps. Thank everyone who's supporting us in this endeavor. And of course, excellent questions, excellent testimony again this evening. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned and I will see you on Monday.
Thank you very much.
Yes.